NBA app. We had unprecedented access into training camp. We got to see a specific conversation between Doc and James Harden. And in that, this is something that's made a lot of rounds on social media. But Doc told him, quote, "We got to establish Joel and you. There's a pecking order. This ain't a democracy." And this, he's telling Harden they need to get and be the ball as much as possible. Then Harden needs to get his. And then everyone else, which is kind of what Eric kind of said last year when we first got Harden. So what do you guys kind of make of this? Because everyone online is interpreting it in their own different way on it. But what do you make of this, Eric?
I would say it's like, who thought it would be different though? Like who thought that it wouldn't, Joel wouldn't be first and James would be second? Like, was there someone thinking it shouldn't be like that?
I think it's people trying to make something out of it, saying like, there's a lot of takes on this, but one of them was like, is Harden disagreeing with him? Does Harden think he needs to just dribble around and find people like he used to do? Or why are they even having this? It should be common sense by now type thing. He shouldn't even need to tell him this at this point, that kind of stuff.
I agree. It's like, I didn't really understand why, unless it was just made for television. I didn't understand like why you would have like this kind of conversation. Like, people, it's like teams don't come out and say, hey, this is our situation, this is our depth chart, and this is, the pecking order as far as who gets the most touches, who should get the most shots. Like, teams don't come out and say it, but we can go around the whole league and kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't understand that, Joel is number one. Now, if there was a conversation about if someone's out the game or, someone's injured, then yeah, I get it. Now, maybe we didn't get the whole context of the conversation, but if it's just going into the season and going to a game and this is the first time they had this conversation, like, I'll be very shocked. So I really think it was just made for television, or it's more to it.
First, let me say the mic'd up thing was cool. I like that a lot. That was great. Yeah, and yeah, some of it is because they know they're mic'd, right? But I like, even though, yes, I do agree with elements that it should have been said already. I think part of it is that habits are hard to break, right? Harden's had the habit of having to create something out of nothing and having to be the magician and pull the rabbit out of his hat when he's got four guys next to him, right? And even though he's played half a season with Embiid and a much more talented roster overall, he might just have to be reminded that once in a while, like, hey, man, I noticed in the last possession you kind of dribbled around for like that 16 seconds. We don't need to do that. Like, you don't need to do that anymore. Break all of that. Because at one point Harden was like, "Oh, I'm not the president no more." Yeah, and you're right. You're not. Like, that, right? So you get it. Let Joel get his. You get yours. And then because of you getting yours and Joel getting his, everything will come easier. I think that's kind of how he was saying it. And I think Harden will thank him at season's end when his legs aren't jello because he had to dribble around for 20 seconds to create something. You don't have to do that anymore. This will save yourself a lot of energy in your legs when you realize that. Just make it simple, man. Go to Joel, let him dominate. When three people are guarding Joel, then you can play one-on-one with somebody and dominate. And then when four guys are dedicated to watching you and Joel, then everyone else will have single coverage and like half an eye on them. Like Maxey and Harris playing against single coverage all the time. That's great. I welcome that. So, I mean, if it's something that Doc think you need to tell him and remind him, just be like, hey, just as a reminder, this isn't Houston anymore. Then whatever, get it out of the way now so you don't tell him this in game 5. So I think it was good. I think it was cool to hear that.
Yeah. But he also did say, and there was another quote there. He kind of talked to him about being the facilitator that he is, and that he kind of, he's kind of setting it up. He's setting everything up for everyone. But yeah, it is interesting that they had to have that conversation, and it was for TV and the NBA app. So maybe they made it a little bit dramatized, maybe.
I'm sure there will be lineups where he will have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when there's no Joel on the floor and maybe no Maxey on the floor, then now it's time to arrange and create things using your skills.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, don't we know this? Like, we talk about what. So on one hand, we talking about winning the championship. On the other hand, we talking about what the pecking order is. After training camp started, like, come on, man, got to be made for television. Has to be.
Unless James is so concerned with getting other people involved and not getting his own, he'd be like, no, don't worry about them yet.
That could be it too.
Getting them, they'll get yours when you get yours.
That makes sense as far as if they're having a conversation. It's not about who's the number one. It's about, hey, dude, once we establish Joel, it has to be you. That makes sense.
Everyone else.
And then everyone else.
Yeah.
Now that makes sense. That's why I said it has to be either made for television or more different context to it.
He did say, he said it's a pecking order. Joel, feed Joel, and then you, and then everybody else. So I think Harden gets up. I think Harden might just get lost into like that whole let me lead the league in assists, like because no one's
I mean, and there was times when we felt that James needed to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I do believe that, but I do believe that it doesn't have to always be with his ball in his hands the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's the part that it'll be interesting to see how they do that. So if Doc is saying, hey, this is the plan going, but how are we going to do it? Is it just, hey, here you go, let's give you some pick and rolls and you go ISO one-on-one? Or is he going to come off screens from behind the defense and catch and play? Is he going to catch and shoot? Are you going to run plays for him without the ball? I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Based on the playoffs, especially against Miami, the whole team definitely needs to work on getting the ball to Embiid in the post, because that seemed like a major problem for them at the end of the last
That
game.
seems to be a league-wide thing.
You're right.
A lot of coaches, a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of older guys, especially older coaches that coach in the league and even in college, they all talk about how guys struggle throwing the ball into the post.
Yeah.
And it was such a routine thing for us because it was such a big emphasis, whereas now it's not that big of an emphasis. So
True.
I don't think it's necessarily it's post, but holding your post position as well. So I think it's a combination of both, and you may not have a big 7-footer that you're throwing the ball to down there. So
yeah, most of those guys are out by the 3-point line now. That's why.
So
I think I read or heard that there was a day in practice where you had to throw the ball to Joel. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, it was a drill they had that they couldn't pass anybody else besides Joel.
There you go. So it makes
set.
me feel good to know they realize it. They know it. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes you're big and you be your outlet as well, especially when you have a guy like him that can score at different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's an outlet, finding him, and sometimes that breaks the defense down and it breaks pressure. Like Shaquille O'Neal wasn't necessarily a guy that initiated their offense with the Lakers, but he could break pressure because he was so big. They could just throw him the ball, him break pressure, and then they get into any kind of set from there. So.
Yeah, a lot of what Doc said is what Shaq has said a lot. Like when we had our games on TNT, where he said when it was him and Kobe, he said I would go get my 10 or 12 and then start the game off. Then Kobe would go get his 10 or 12. But they kind of play off each other like that, and that's kind of what it seemed like. That's what Doc's saying, I guess. I mean,
yeah, we'll see. I mean, Kobe was different than James as far as going to get it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.